I think I should start by repeating something Gareth said, that these TA access, it pays for your travel, for your hotel, and it pays the host institute, essentially their running costs in order to perform an average type of access. So it should cover technical help and also consumables, whatever you need in that respect. Something it won't cover is if you're expecting them to modify the facility in order to do something it couldn't do beforehand. So that's something that some of our users have asked about that, and that essentially isn't covered by Europlanet. Another thing I'd like to start to say before I go through these practical suggestions, and these are biased. So we run a simulation facility, so we don't really analyze samples. There are other types of labs that do that, and I don't know much about running field sites. So these suggestions I've made are based on our experience of both successful and not successful applications to our lab. Yes, and they're usually things that we would tell an applicant when they first contact us. So ideally, as Gareth said, you should talk to the host institute during the process when you're writing the application. This is good for you. They're allowed to help you. They're supposed to help you. They're on your side. They want your application to be successful. And yes, and as maybe I think Gareth also said, is that they don't all have to be planetary science. Some can be non-planetary science. But one issue that has come up previously, and that is that you shouldn't really try to do both at once. So if essentially your research is non-planetary science, you should stick to that. You shouldn't try to include, oh, but it's also interesting to study Mars, blah, blah, blah. I think because normally if you stress that this is a non-planetary science, if it's terrestrial science essentially, which as Gareth said is also a planet, it's okay to do that. But it probably will go to a different type of referee than if it's like conventional, traditional planetary science. So then you could really be hurting yourself if you're trying to stretch your research into a direction that you think will help it become approved. I would try not to do that. Be honest and either stick essentially to your research. And if that is kind of terrestrial based, then do that. Don't try to fake something else. So most of our applications are really relatively well written, because normally they're written by research teams, and so the science arguments are normally strong, and that section, that part of it is normally quite strong. We have had some applications from more industrial type groups. Maybe they're developing some technology that they want to test or calibrate before it's sent out into space or to a planet or whatever. And there the problem has been that they've typically been unsuccessful previously, and we're working on trying to get their success rate up. And I think one way to do that is that they should stress links to missions and stress the impact that their technology development is going to have. So clearly they will be weak in trying to present a scientific case, but then they should really try to stress the technology case. I've mentioned references because this issue has come up before, but I will start by saying that not many, but some applications have been successful even when they've had no references in them. And other applications have been successful even though they've had, for example, 15 references in them. So it's not a deal breaker, and most of my practical suggestions here are not really deal breakers in the sense that you can still write a successful application even if you ignore all my suggestions. But I do think they'll be stronger if you try to at least take some of them on board. And I would normally expect that at least one reference is good, but there's no need to have an extensive library of references. This is probably overkill for a proposal of this length. One thing that I always tell applicants when they first talk to us, and that is to make a detailed work plan, a test plan for when they come. So they should think about every day that they're at the facility. And this shows that they've thought through the whole process. They've thought that they're landing on a plane and they're showing up with some equipment, let's say. What are they going to do then for every day? They should try to justify every day that they've applied for. And they should include details of how they're going to set it up. They at least reserve some time, at least half a day, for setting things up and calibrating, testing them. And also, at the end, at least half a day for taking things apart and transferring data and whatnot. And yes, make a test plan and present that with the host beforehand, in that maybe something that they think is trivial and takes a very short time to measure, maybe it takes a longer time, and vice versa. For example, we run a chamber where we adjust the pressure, and we know how long it takes to pump the system down and let it up to air. Normally a visitor will not know that. So they should ask us and we will tell them, and then they will be able to adjust their test plan accordingly. Yeah, so also be specific about the instruments you want to use. So we have some instrumentation which applicants are not necessarily aware of, but could certainly help in the proposal if they mention that they can, for example, measure wind speed with this or measure pressure with that other instrument. So that kind of thing, I think, is helpful in the implementation and work plan section. It makes it look like you've thought about it. It makes it look like you're going to have a successful visit. And impact section, it's always a good idea to present some kind of plan for how you're going to present your work. So you want to, in your application, you want to make it look like you've thought through the whole process of preparing for it, coming here, taking data, going home, analyzing it, and then presenting your results to the general public or to other scientists. So, for example, specifically mention a specific conference if you have one in mind, or a specific journal where you really hope you're going to present this work. And yes, if there's any other kind of outreach or impact of your work, for example, to a mission, then yeah, mention it. It can only strengthen your application. So yes, that was about it. So remember, these are subjective. They're subjective in the sense that some of these suggestions might not be relevant to field work and not relevant to sample analysis, but have a think about them anyway.